The sound of a slap echoed through the elegant drawing room of the Davidson estate, leaving 20-year-old Rosalie Davidson's cheeks stinging and her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Her father, Josiah Davidson, one of the wealthiest cattle barons in Missouri, stood before her, his face contorted with rage, his voice thundering through the room like a summer storm across the plains. "You have brought shame upon this family," he roared, his finger pointing accusingly at her still flat stomach. "No daughter of mine will bear a bastard child under my roof." It was May of 1878, and Rosalie's world was crumbling around her. Just 3 months ago, she had believed herself in love with Thomas Whitley, the son of her father's business partner. He had courted her properly, had whispered promises of marriage under moonlit skies, and she, naive and trusting, had given herself to him completely. Now Thomas was gone, hastily married off to a banker's daughter in Boston, and Rosalie was left alone to face the consequences of their passion. "Father, please," she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea Thomas would—" "Silence!" Josiah slammed his fist against the mahogany side table, causing her mother's prized porcelain figurines to tremble. "Your mother and I have decided. You will be sent to the Sisters of Mercy in St. Louis. They will see to your condition, and the child will be given to a decent Christian family." From her perch on the settee, Rosalie's mother, Eleanor, dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, but offered no defense for her only daughter. "I will not abandon my child," Rosalie said, straightening her spine despite the fear coursing through her veins. "This baby is innocent of any wrongdoing." Her father's laugh was cold and brittle. "Then you leave me no choice. If you will not see reason, you are no longer welcome in this house. You have until morning to collect your belongings. After that, you are dead to us." The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Rosalie looked to her mother, silently pleading for support, but Eleanor Davidson merely turned away, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. That night, as the household slept, Rosalie packed what she could into a single valise, a few dresses, her mother's silver hairbrush, a small pouch containing the money she had saved from her birthday gifts over the years, and a daguerreotype of her parents taken in happier times. As the first light of dawn broke across the eastern sky, she slipped from the only home she had ever known. St. Joseph, Missouri was already bustling with activity despite the early hour. Freight wagons rumbled along the streets, and the distant whistle of a steamboat on the Missouri River reminded Rosalie that life continued uninterrupted despite her personal tragedy. She made her way to the stagecoach office, her heart pounding with each step. "Where to, miss?" asked the ticket agent, a balding man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose. Rosalie hesitated. She had relatives in Chicago, but they would surely turn her away once they learned of her disgrace. St. Louis held only the prospect of the Sisters of Mercy and the loss of her child. "What's your farthest destination?" she asked finally. The agent consulted a schedule board behind him. "Got a coach leaving for Santa Fe Territory later today. Make stops in several towns along the way." "How far will this take me?" Rosalie asked, emptying her pouch onto the counter. The agent counted the money quickly. "This'll get you as far as Clear Creek, Colorado Territory. Little mining town that's settled down some in recent years. Not much there for a young lady like yourself, though." "It's far enough," Rosalie said firmly, gathering what remained of her money. "I'll take a ticket to Clear Creek." The journey west was long and grueling. As the stagecoach rattled across the plains of Kansas and into the foothills of Colorado, Rosalie found herself jostled between a variety of traveling companions, a drummer selling patent medicines, a school teacher bound for Denver, a young couple heading to California to start a new life. She spoke little, offering only the barest details of her story when pressed. She was a widow, she told them, seeking a fresh start. By the time the stagecoach rolled into Clear Creek 7 days later, Rosalie was exhausted, her dress wrinkled and dust-covered, her stomach queasy from both the constant motion and her advancing pregnancy. The town itself was smaller than she had imagined, a single main street lined with wooden buildings, a church with a modest steeple, and scattered houses climbing the hillsides where the mines had once been. "End of the line for Clear Creek," the driver called, helping Rosalie down from the coach. "Next stage through is Tuesday next." if you're continuing on. Rosalie looked around the unfamiliar town, suddenly aware of how alone she truly was. Is there a hotel? She asked, clutching her valise tightly. Miners rest at the end of the street, the driver said, already unloading the mail sacks. Mrs. Perkins runs it clean, if not fancy. Nodding her thanks, Rosalie started down the dusty street, acutely aware of the curious glances from the townspeople. A young woman traveling alone was an unusual sight in a frontier town, and she could almost hear the whispers beginning. By the time she reached the Miners' Rest, a simple 2-story wooden structure with a painted sign swinging in the breeze, her courage was faltering. Mrs. Perkins, a stout woman with gray hair pulled into a severe bun, eyed Rosalie suspiciously as she requested a room. "Traveling alone, are you?" the woman asked, making no move to retrieve a key. "Yes, madam. I'm looking for work," Rosalie improvised. "What kind of work does a city girl like you expect to find in Clear Creek?" Mrs. Perkins pressed. Rosalie's mind raced. "I can cook, clean, sew. I'm educated, I could perhaps teach." Mrs. Perkins snorted. "Town's too small for a proper school yet. Just the preacher's wife teaching the little ones their letters." Her gaze drifted to Rosalie's midsection, and though the pregnancy wasn't showing yet, Rosalie felt as if the woman could see right through her. "I'll need payment in advance," Mrs. Perkins said finally. "Room's 50 cents a night, includes breakfast." Rosalie's heart sank as she counted out the money. At this rate, her funds would last barely 2 weeks. "Is there anywhere in town I might inquire about work?" she asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Mrs. Perkins softened slightly. "Saloon's always looking for girls, but I suspect that's not what you're after." She considered for a moment. "Try Miller's General Store. Old man Miller's hands are getting too arthritic for the bookkeeping, and the cafe might need help with the noon rush." Rosalie thanked her and climbed the narrow stairs to her room, a spare, clean space with a single bed, washstand, and a window overlooking the street below. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, she sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself to weep for the first time since leaving Missouri. The next morning, fortified by a breakfast of corn mush and strong coffee, Rosalie set out to find work. Mr. Miller at the general store listened politely to her request, but shook his head. "Already promised the position to the preacher's nephew," he explained. At the cafe, the harried owner barely spared her a glance before declaring he couldn't afford help. By midday, Rosalie had been turned away from every establishment in town. Some rejected her outright, others seemed interested until they learned she had no references, no family nearby to vouch for her character. As she stood in the middle of the street, the sun beating down mercilessly, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She had been so focused on escaping her father's wrath that she hadn't truly considered what would come after. "Whoa there, miss. You all right?" The deep voice broke through her thoughts as a strong hand caught her elbow, steadying her. Rosalie looked up into the most startlingly blue eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "I'm fine, thank you," she managed, though her knees felt weak. Just a moment of lightheadedness. The man didn't release her arm. "You look like you could use a sit-down and something cool to drink. Cafe's just across the way." "That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly—" "I insist," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm Forrest Norwood, by the way. Most folks just call me Forrest." "Rosalie Davidson," she replied automatically, then immediately regretted giving her real name. But there was something in Forrest Norwood's steady gaze that made her feel she could trust him. The cafe owner who had dismissed her earlier now hurried to seat them, his manner entirely different in Forrest's presence. A glass of cool water appeared before Rosalie, followed by a plate of biscuits and ham. "I can't accept this," she protested, even as her stomach growled audibly. "I have no way to repay you." Forrest waved away her concern. "Consider it Western hospitality." He studied her for a moment. "You're new to Clear Creek. Stage came in yesterday, didn't it?" Rosalie nodded, taking a small sip of water. "I'm looking for work, but it seems there are few opportunities. What kind of work are you seeking?" "Anything respectable," she said, choosing her words carefully. "I can cook, clean, keep accounts. I was educated at Miss Porter's school for young ladies in St. Louis." The lie came easily. She had cousins who had attended the prestigious school. Forrest leaned back in his chair, considering. As it happens, I might have a position that would suit. My housekeeper left last month to care for her ailing sister in Denver. Place has been a mess ever since. Hope fluttered in Rosalie's chest. You're offering me a position as your housekeeper? My ranch is about 5 miles outside of town, Forrest explained. Nothing fancy, but it's growing. Got a decent-sized herd and 4 hands working for me. They bunk in the bunkhouse, but the main house needs looking after. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. Room and board plus $10 a month. It was a generous offer, more than generous for a young woman with no references and dwindling funds. Yet Rosalie hesitated. You live alone, Mr. Norwood? His expression remained serious, but a hint of understanding flashed in his eyes. I respect your caution, Miss Davidson. Yes, I live alone, but my foreman and his wife have a cabin just a stone's throw from the main house. Mrs. Martinez would be nearby should you need a woman's company. He leaned forward. I'm offering honest work, Miss Davidson, nothing more. Rosalie searched his face for any sign of deception, but found only sincerity. When would you need me to start? I'm heading back to the ranch this afternoon. You could ride out with me, see the place. If it's not to your liking, I'll bring you back to town tomorrow, no questions asked. It was reckless, perhaps, to accept a position with a man she had just met, to agree to live miles from town and his home. But what choice did she have? Her money would run out soon. And then what? The thought of her unborn child spurred her decision. I accept your offer, Mr. Norwood, she said firmly. I would like to see the ranch today, if possible. A hint of a smile touched Forrest's lips. I'll meet you in front of the Miners' Rest at 3 o'clock. Pack whatever you need. We can send for the rest later if you decide to stay. As Forrest departed, leaving enough money to cover their meal, and then some, Rosalie found herself studying his retreating figure. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his movements confident but not cocky. His clothes were well worn, but clean denim trousers, a checked shirt, a leather vest. Not a dandified cowboy like some she had seen in St. Joseph, but a working rancher. There was something reassuring in his straightforward manner, in the way the cafe owner and others on the street nodded respectfully as he passed. At precisely 3 o'clock, Rosalie stood in front of the Miners' Rest with her valise, having settled her bill with Mrs. Perkins, who raised her eyebrows but made no comment about Rosalie's sudden departure. Forrest arrived with a wagon rather than a saddle horse, the back loaded with supplies from the general store. He helped Rosalie up onto the seat with careful hands, stowing her valise behind them. It's not a long journey, he said as they pulled away from town, but the road gets rough in places. As they traveled, Forrest pointed out landmarks, a rock formation that resembled a sleeping bear, the creek that gave the town its name, a distant mountain peak still capped with snow despite the summer heat. Rosalie found herself relaxing in his company. He didn't press her with questions about her past or her circumstances, instead filling the silence with stories about the territory and his ranch. Been in Colorado going on 8 years now, he told her. Came out with the silver rush, tried my hand at mining like everyone else. Found out pretty quick I wasn't cut out for it. Started running cattle instead, built up slowly. Now the Double N is one of the more successful spreads in the county. The Double N? My brand 2 N's back to back, for Norwood, naturally. He grinned, and Rosalie was struck by how it transformed his face, softening the hard lines and bringing a sparkle to those blue eyes. As they crested a hill, the ranch came into view, a broad valley with a meandering creek, lush with early summer grass. A modest but well-built log house stood near a cluster of cottonwood trees, with a barn, corrals, and several smaller outbuildings nearby. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully. It's beautiful, Rosalie said honestly. It's home, Forrest replied simply, a note of pride in his voice. As they approached the house, a Mexican woman emerged from a small cabin nearby, wiping her hands on her apron. Senor Forrest, we were not expecting you back so soon. Change of plans, Elena, Forrest called, bringing the wagon to a halt. This is Miss Davidson. She's going to be taking over as housekeeper. Elena Martinez was perhaps 40, with dark hair streaked with silver and warm brown eyes that assessed Rosalie quickly, but not unkindly. Welcome, Miss Davidson. The house has been too quiet without a woman's touch. Thank you, Mrs. Martinez, Rosalie replied, immediately liking the older woman's direct manner. Elena, would you mind showing Miss Davidson around the house while I unload these supplies? Forrest asked, already beginning to lift sacks from the wagon. Of course. Come, Miss Davidson. I will show you everything. The main house was larger than it had appeared, from a distance a central great room with a massive stone fireplace, a well-appointed kitchen with a cast-iron stove and pump at the sink, and 3 bedrooms off a short hallway. The furnishings were simple but solid, the floors swept clean, though a layer of dust covered most surfaces. Senor Forrest, he is a good man, but not much for housekeeping, Elena explained with a small smile. He works hard, expects the same from others. Fair, though, always fair. How long have you and your husband worked for Mr. Norwood? Rosalie asked. 5 years now. My Carlos was the first hand Senor Forrest hired when he bought this land. The ranch has grown, and so has our family. She patted her rounded stomach, and Rosalie realized the woman was several months pregnant. This will be our 4th child. Congratulations, Rosalie said, feeling a sudden kinship with the woman. When are you expecting? November, God willing. Elena gave Rosalie an appraising look. And you, Miss Davidson, what brings a young lady like yourself to Clear Creek? Rosalie tensed. I was seeking a new start. Elena nodded, seeming to understand what remained unsaid. Well, you have found a good place for beginnings. The smallest bedroom will be yours, she continued, opening a door to reveal a cozy room with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the creek. It's not fancy, but it's private. It's perfect, Rosalie said, meaning it. After the cramped hotel room and the jarring stagecoach, the small bedroom seemed like a sanctuary. By supper time, Rosalie had unpacked her few belongings and familiarized herself with the kitchen. Elena had helped her prepare a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and salt pork, which Forrest ate with appreciation. Best meal I've had in weeks, he declared, pushing back from the table. Mrs. Martinez is a fine cook, but she's got her own family to feed. I've been making do with coffee and whatever doesn't require much skill. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Rosalie said. Tomorrow I'll do a proper inventory of the pantry and make a list of what we need. Whatever you think necessary, Forrest agreed. The ranch turns a good profit. We don't need to scrimp on food. After supper, Forrest excused himself to check on a new calf, leaving Rosalie to clear the table and wash the dishes. As she worked, she found herself humming softly, a sense of tentative peace settling over her. The future was still uncertain, her situation precarious, but for the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she felt a glimmer of hope. That night, lying in the comfortable bed with the window open to catch the cool mountain breeze, Rosalie placed a hand on her stomach. We'll be all right, she whispered to her unborn child. Somehow, we'll find a way. The days fell into a steady rhythm at the Double N. Rosalie rose with the sun, prepared breakfast for Forrest and occasionally for the ranch hands when they came in from early morning chores, then spent her days cleaning, cooking, and gradually transforming the bachelor's house into a comfortable home. She hung curtains made from flour sacks dyed with berries, arranged wildflowers in mason jars, and scrubbed every surface until it gleamed. Forrest, for his part, was an undemanding employer. He spent most daylight hours out on the range with his men, returning tired and dusty, but unfailingly polite. He appreciated the improvements to his home without comment, simply nodding his approval when he noticed a new touch. Over supper each evening, he would share news of the ranch, a fence that needed mending, a wolf spotted near the north pasture, plans for the upcoming roundup. Elena visited often, bringing her children to play in the creek while she and Rosalie talked. Under the older woman's tutelage, Rosalie learned to make tortillas from scratch, to preserve vegetables for the winter, and 100 other skills her privileged upbringing had never included. You have good hands, Elena observed one day as they worked together, kneading bread dough. Quick to learn. I've had to be, Rosalie replied. By now, nearly a month had passed since her arrival at the Double N, and her condition would soon be impossible to hide. Her dresses grew tighter across the middle, and morning sickness plagued her, though she tried to conceal it. Elena's knowing gaze rested on Rosalie's midsection. How far along are you? Rosalie froze, her hands deep in the dough. "I don't know what you mean." "Please, Miss Davidson, I have 3 children and another on the way. I know the signs." Elena's voice was kind, without judgment. "You do not need to fear. Your secret is safe with me." Tears welled in Rosalie's eyes. "Almost 4 months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "My family cast me out when they discovered it. The father, he abandoned me." Elena laid a flour-dusted hand over Rosalie's. "I am sorry for your pain, but a child is a blessing, even when it comes in difficult circumstances." "Mr. Norwood will dismiss me when he discovers it," Rosalie said, voicing her greatest fear. "What respectable rancher would keep an unwed mother in his home?" "Senor Forrest is a fair man," Elena insisted. "Talk to him. He may surprise you." But Rosalie couldn't bring herself to risk the fragile security she had found. Instead, she began to wear looser dresses and aprons tied above her growing belly, hoping to conceal her condition for as long as possible. June turned to July, and the summer heat intensified. Rosalie found her duties more taxing as her pregnancy advanced. But she pushed herself harder, determined to prove her worth. She put up preserves, darned Forrest's socks, and even learned to shoot the rifle he insisted she keep near for protection when he was away from the house. "You're a natural," he told her, genuine admiration in his voice as she hit the target he'd set up. "Most city ladies I've known would faint at the thought of handling a firearm." "I'm not most ladies," Rosalie replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Forrest's gaze lingered on her face. "No, you certainly are not." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where she wasn't carrying another man's child, where she might have met Forrest Norwood under different circumstances. But reality crashed back quickly. Even if he could overlook her condition, once he learned she was the disgraced daughter of Rosalie Davidson, any regard he might have for her would surely vanish. As July gave way to August, a heat wave settled over the valley. The creek ran lower, and the cattle sought shade during the hottest part of the day. Inside the house, Rosalie worked with the windows open, hoping to catch any breeze. She was preserving peaches, the kitchen sweltering from the stove, when a wave of dizziness overcame her. She grasped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself, but the room spun alarmingly. As darkness closed in around her vision, she was vaguely aware of the sound of the front door opening, of boots on the wooden floor. "Rosalie?" Forrest's voice seemed to come from very far away. Then strong arms were around her as her knees buckled, and she knew no more. When Rosalie regained consciousness, she was lying on her bed, a cool cloth on her forehead. Forrest sat beside her, his face etched with concern. "Thank God," he murmured as her eyes fluttered open. "You gave me quite a scare." "I'm sorry," she whispered, trying to sit up. "The heat—" "Lie still," he commanded gently, his hand on her shoulder. "Elena's on her way. I sent Carlos to fetch her." Panic surged through Rosalie. Elena would surely tell him the truth. "That's not necessary." "I'm feeling much better now." "You fainted dead away in my kitchen," Forrest said firmly. "I'm not taking any chances with your health." As if summoned by his words, Elena appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned but unsurprised. "Senor Forrest, would you please fetch some fresh water from the well, and perhaps prepare some tea? The mint would be best for Miss Davidson." Though clearly reluctant to leave, Forrest nodded and departed. The moment he was gone, Elena closed the door and turned to Rosalie. "You have not told him," she said, more statement than question. "I couldn't," Rosalie whispered. "He'll send me away." Elena shook her head, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You cannot hide it much longer. Your body is working hard to create new life. In this heat, working as you do, it is too much. You must rest more, drink more water." She placed a hand on Rosalie's abdomen, feeling the slight swell there. "The baby seems well, but you must take better care." "What am I going to do?" Rosalie asked, despair washing over her. "First, you will rest," Elena said practically. "Then, when you are stronger, you will speak with Senor Forrest. He has a right to know, and you need his support." When Forrest returned with water and tea, Elena shooed him out again, insisting Rosalie needed to rest. "She will be fine," Elena assured him, "but she should not work for the remainder of the day. Tomorrow, light duties only." Later that evening, after a nap had restored some of her strength, Rosalie emerged from her room to find Forrest sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee cooling before him, his expression troubled. "You should be resting," he said, rising as she entered. "I'm feeling much better," she insisted, though in truth she still felt weak. "I wanted to apologize for today, and to thank you for your help." "Sit down," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "We need to talk." Rosalie's heart plummeted. Had Elena told him after all? She sank into the chair, steeling herself for dismissal. "I've been thinking," Forrest began, his eyes fixed on the table. "You've been working too hard. This house, cooking for me, and sometimes the hands, preserving for winter, it's too much for one person, especially in this heat." "I'm more than capable," Rosalie started to protest. "I know you're capable," he interrupted. "That's not in question. But I've been selfish, expecting you to manage everything alone." He finally looked up, meeting her eyes. "I'm going to hire a girl from town to help with the heavier work. Mrs. Perkins mentioned her niece is looking for a position 16, strong as an ox according to her aunt." Rosalie blinked in surprise. "That's very thoughtful, but really, I don't need—" "It's decided," Forrest said firmly. "I'll ride into town tomorrow to make the arrangements." His concern touched her deeply. Here was yet another kindness from a man who had already shown her more consideration than she had any right to expect. Guilt washed over her guilt at her deception, at allowing him to believe she was simply overworked when there was a far more significant reason for her collapse. "Mr. Norwood Forrest," she began hesitantly, "there's something I need to tell you." His expression softened. "Whatever it is, Rosalie, you can tell me." But in that moment, looking into his kind blue eyes, Rosalie's courage failed her. The thought of seeing disappointment, or, worse, disgust, replace that warmth was more than she could bear. "I just wanted to say thank you. For everything." A flicker of what might have been disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded. "You're welcome. Now, back to bed with you. Doctor's orders." "Elena's not a doctor," Rosalie pointed out with a small smile. "Close enough," Forrest replied, "and a good deal more frightening when she's riled." The next day, true to his word, Forrest rode into Clear Creek. He returned that evening with news that Betsy Perkins would start the following Monday, coming out 3 days a week to help with laundry and heavier chores. Life at the Double N settled into a new rhythm. Betsy, a cheerful, strapping girl with freckles and a ready laugh, took to the work with enthusiasm. With her help, Rosalie was able to rest more, though she still insisted on cooking Forrest's meals herself and keeping his clothes mended. August brought the first subtle hints of autumn cooler mornings, leaves beginning to turn on the highest branches. Rosalie's pregnancy continued to advance, her dresses letting out as far as they could go, her aprons no longer sufficient to disguise her condition. She knew her time was running short, that she couldn't continue this deception much longer. Then came the day that changed everything. Forrest had ridden out at dawn with his men to move a herd to the lower pasture before the first frost. Rosalie, now in her 6th month and showing unmistakably, took advantage of his absence to wash clothes without fear of discovery. She was hanging sheets on the line, the September sun warm on her back, when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Thinking Forrest had returned early, she hastily grabbed her shawl to wrap around herself. But as she turned, she froze in horror. 3 riders approached, and at their head was a face she had hoped never to see again, Thomas Whitley, the father of her child. "Well, well," Thomas called as they drew closer. "If it isn't Miss Rosalie Davidson herself." Rosalie's mouth went dry. "What are you doing here, Thomas?" He dismounted, handing his reins to one of his companions. "Is that any way to greet an old friend?" His gaze traveled to her midsection, poorly concealed by the shawl. "I see my information was correct. You are in an interesting condition." "How did you find me?" she demanded, backing toward the house. Thomas smiled coldly. "Your father has been searching for you for months. When word reached St. Joseph that a young woman matching your description had taken the stage west, he hired Pinkerton men to track you down." He gestured to the hard-faced men behind him. "Not Pinkertons, of course, just some fellows willing to earn $1. Your father wants you brought home, Rosalie, to spare the family further embarrassment." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Rosalie said, her voice stronger than she felt. "This is my home now." Thomas laughed. "Home? You're a housekeeper, Rosalie, a servant. Your father is prepared to forgive your indiscretion if you return willingly. The story has already been put about that you've been visiting relatives in Europe. No one need know about the child. And what of my baby? Rosalie demanded, one hand protectively covering her stomach. As we discussed before I left, it will be placed with a suitable family. You'll be free to make an advantageous marriage. To someone other than you, I presume, Rosalie said bitterly. How is your wife, Thomas? Does she know you're here, trying to retrieve the woman you abandoned? Thomas's expression hardened. That's enough, Rosalie. You're coming with us one way or another. Your father was very clear. One of the men behind Thomas dismounted, moving toward Rosalie with purposeful strides. She backed away, reaching for the door handle behind her. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Thomas warned. My associates aren't known for their gentle touch. Come quietly, and no one needs to get hurt. The only ones getting hurt will be you three if you don't get back on those horses and ride out. The voice came from behind the barn, steady and cold as steel. Forrest emerged, rifle raised, his expression more dangerous than Rosalie had ever seen it. This doesn't concern you, cowboy, Thomas snapped. The lady is coming with us. The lady doesn't seem to want to go, Forrest replied, moving to stand beside Rosalie. And since she's under my protection, that makes it very much my concern. The standoff was broken by the appearance of Carlos and the other ranch hands, all armed, spreading out to surround the intruders. Thomas glanced around, clearly reassessing his options. You don't understand the situation. This woman is Josiah Davidson's daughter. Her father has sent for her. I don't care if she's the president's daughter, Forrest said evenly. She's made her choice clear. Now, you have 10 seconds to get back on those horses and ride out. After that, my men start shooting. For a moment, Thomas looked as if he might challenge Forrest. Then, with a muttered curse, he remounted his horse. This isn't over, Rosalie. Your father isn't a man who gives up easily. Tell Josiah Davidson that Rosalie is safe and well, Forrest called as they turned to go, and if he sends anyone else after her, they won't be riding back at all. Only when the three riders were well away did Forrest lower his rifle. He turned to Rosalie, who stood trembling on the porch. Are you all right? He asked softly. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the reality of her situation crashed over her. Forrest knew who she was. He had seen her condition clearly in the bright sunlight. There was nowhere left to hide. I think, Forrest said carefully, that we have some things to discuss. The ranch hands dispersed, returning to their duties with backward glances. Forrest guided Rosalie gently into the house, his hand warm at the small of her back. In the kitchen, he pulled out a chair for her and poured her a glass of water before sitting across from her. Josiah Davidson's daughter, he said finally. That explains a few things. You've heard of my father? Rosalie asked, her voice small. Every cattleman west of the Mississippi has heard of Josiah Davidson, Forrest replied. His reputation precedes him, not all of it flattering. He studied her face. But I'm more interested in hearing your story, Rosalie. The truth, this time. So she told him everything: her relationship with Thomas, her pregnancy, her father's ultimatum, her flight west. As she spoke, Forrest's expression remained unreadable, his eyes never leaving her face. I understand if you want me to leave, she concluded, staring down at her hands folded in her lap. I've deceived you from the beginning. Is that what you think of me? Forrest asked quietly. That I would throw out a woman in your condition? Rosalie looked up, surprised by the hurt in his voice. Most men would. I'm not most men. He reached across the table, covering her hands with his own. Rosalie, from the moment I saw you standing in the street in Clear Creek, looking lost but determined, I knew you were running from something. I didn't need to know what. All that mattered was that you needed help, and I was in a position to offer it. But now you know, she whispered, about the baby, about who I am. Yes, now I know, he agreed. You're a brave, strong woman who chose a difficult path rather than abandon her child. You're someone who works hard and has made my house into a home for the first time since I built it. His grip on her hands tightened. And you're someone I've come to care for deeply. Rosalie's heart stuttered. What are you saying? I'm saying that I want you to stay, Rosalie. Not as my housekeeper, but as— He hesitated, then seemed to make up his mind. As my wife, if you'll have me. Your wife? Rosalie gasped. But the baby will be mine in every way that matters, Forrest said firmly. I know this is sudden, and I'll understand if you need time to consider. But I want you to know that my offer is sincere. I've grown to love you, Rosalie Davidson. I think I started falling for you that first day in the cafe. Tears filled Rosalie's eyes. You can't mean it. Once the town finds out about my condition, they'll ostracize you. Your reputation— Hang my reputation, Forrest said with surprising vehemence. I built this ranch from nothing. I don't answer to the gossips in Clear Creek or anywhere else. His expression softened. But I understand if your feelings don't match mine. If you'd prefer, I can arrange for you to go somewhere safe. Where your father won't find you? Denver, perhaps, or even San Francisco. No, Rosalie said quickly, surprising herself with the force of her response. I don't want to go anywhere else. She took a deep breath. The truth is, I've been fighting my feelings for you almost since I arrived. I told myself it was impossible, that once you knew the truth, you'd want nothing to do with me. And now that you know I want everything to do with you? Forrest asked, a smile beginning to curve his lips. Now, I think I'd be a fool to refuse the best man I've ever known, Rosalie replied, her heart full to bursting. Yes, Forrest Norwood, I will marry you. He was around the table in an instant, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepening as she responded, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Forrest rested his forehead against hers. I should warn you, I don't plan to wait. Thomas Whitley might come back with reinforcements, and I want no question about our relationship when he does. I'll ride into town tomorrow for the license. We can be married by week's end. So soon? Rosalie asked, though the idea filled her with joy rather than trepidation. Unless you want a grand affair? Forrest asked, suddenly uncertain. I know ladies often dream of elaborate weddings. Rosalie shook her head. I've had enough of society's expectations. A simple ceremony with Elena and Carlos as witnesses would be perfect. Then it's settled. Forrest kissed her again, his hand coming to rest gently on the swell of her stomach. This little one will have my name and my protection, Rosalie. I swear it. True to his word, Forrest rode into Clear Creek the following day, returning with a marriage license and news that the preacher would come out to the ranch on Saturday to perform the ceremony. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and happiness. Elena was overjoyed at the news, embracing Rosalie with tears in her eyes. I told you Senor Forrest was a good man, she said triumphantly. And now you will be Senora Norwood. It is as it should be. On Saturday morning, Rosalie stood in her bedroom, wearing the best of her dresses, a soft blue muslin that Elena had cleverly altered to accommodate her growing belly. Her hair was arranged in a simple knot at the nape of her neck, adorned with wildflowers Elena's daughters had gathered. A knock sounded at the door, and Elena entered, carrying a small package. A gift from Senor Forrest, she explained, handing it to Rosalie. He asked that you wear it today. Inside the package, nestled in a bed of cotton, was a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. Rosalie opened it to find a small piece of paper folded inside, bearing Forrest's bold handwriting. For new beginnings. F. Tears pricked at Rosalie's eyes as Elena fastened the locket around her neck. It's perfect, she whispered. The ceremony took place in the great room of the ranch house, before the fireplace where a cheerful blaze took the autumn chill from the air. Preacher Johnson from Clear Creek officiated, his wife accompanying him to serve as an additional witness. The ranch hands stood respectfully around the edges of the room, freshly shaved and wearing their Sunday best. When Forrest saw Rosalie enter, his face lit with such joy that her last doubts vanished. This was right. This was meant to be. The preacher's words were traditional and brief. When he pronounced them man and wife, Forrest gathered Rosalie into his arms for a kiss that left no doubt of his feelings, prompting good-natured cheers from the assembled company. A celebration followed a feast prepared by Elena and Rosalie in the days before. Music provided by one of the ranch hands who played the fiddle with surprising skill, and dancing that continued well into the evening. When the last guest had departed, Forrest led Rosalie to their bedroom, his room, now theirs with gentle reverence. "Are you happy, Mrs. Norwood?" he asked, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. That night, and in the nights that followed, Forrest proved himself as tender and considerate a lover as he was a husband. He treated Rosalie's changing body with wonder and care, his touch bringing pleasure she had never imagined possible. As autumn deepened into winter, the Double N Ranch prepared for the coming cold. Hay was stacked in the barn, repairs made to the house and outbuildings, and the cattle moved to sheltered pastures. Inside, Rosalie and Forrest created a warm haven against the Colorado winter. In late November, Elena gave birth to a healthy baby boy, with Rosalie assisting the midwife from town. Holding Elena's newborn son, Rosalie felt a surge of anticipation for her own child's arrival, now just weeks away. "You'll be a natural mother," Forrest told her that night as they lay in bed, his hand caressing her rounded belly, where their child force, she had come to think of it as theirs, kicked vigorously. "Just as you're a natural at everything you set your hand to." "I'm terrified," Rosalie admitted. "What if I don't know what to do?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Forrest promised. That's what marriage is about. December brought the first heavy snowfall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Christmas approached, and Rosalie insisted on decorating the house despite her unwieldy condition. Forrest humored her, bringing in pine boughs and berries, helping her arrange them around the house and over the mantel. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire after a simple but festive dinner, Forrest presented Rosalie with another gift, a cradle he had crafted in secret. The wood sanded smooth and polished to a warm glow. "It's beautiful," Rosalie breathed, running her fingers over the intricate carvings of leaves and vines that adorned the headboard. "When did you find time?" "I have my ways," Forrest said with a smile. "Do you like it?" "I love it," she assured him. "And I love you." The words came easily now. After months of marriage had deepened their initial attraction into something profound and lasting. Forrest pulled her close, his arms encircling her and their unborn child. "I love you too, Rosalie Norwood." "Both of you?" The baby came 3 days after Christmas, during a howling blizzard that made fetching the doctor from town impossible. Forrest sent one of the hands to bring Elena, who arrived bundled against the cold, her experienced eyes assessing the situation quickly. "The baby comes," she announced. "All is well, but we must prepare." What followed were hours of pain, unlike anything Rosalie had experienced. But through it all, Forrest remained by her side, wiping her brow, holding her hand, murmuring encouragement. Elena directed him calmly, putting him to work boiling water and tearing sheets into strips. "You're doing wonderfully," Forrest told Rosalie, as another contraction gripped her. "You're the strongest woman I know." "I can't," she gasped as the pain peaked. "It's too much." "You can," he insisted. "You're nearly there. Our child is almost here." Those words, "our child," gave Rosalie renewed strength. With a final, tremendous effort, she brought their baby into the world. "A girl," Elena announced triumphantly, lifting the squalling infant. "A beautiful, healthy girl." After cleaning and swaddling the baby, Elena placed her in Rosalie's arms. Looking down at the tiny, perfect face, Rosalie felt a love so overwhelming it brought tears to her eyes. "She's perfect," Forrest whispered, sitting beside them on the bed, one arm around Rosalie's shoulders, the other hand gently stroking the baby's downy head. "Just like her mother." "What shall we name her?" Rosalie asked, though they had discussed names at length during her pregnancy. "Hope," Forrest said without hesitation, "because that's what she represents for both of us. A new hope, a new beginning." "Hope Norwood," Rosalie repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "It's perfect." In the days that followed, as Rosalie recovered and little Hope thrived, their happiness seemed complete. Forrest doted on his daughter, proudly showing her off to the ranch hands, who presented awkwardly wrapped gifts for the new arrival. Elena and her children visited often, bringing food and advice and cooing over the baby. Yet a shadow lingered at the edges of Rosalie's contentment, the knowledge that Thomas Whitley had found her once and might return, possibly with her father in tow. Forrest, ever attuned to her moods, noticed her occasional glances toward the road that led to town. "They won't take you from us," he assured her one evening as they sat together, Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle beside them. "I won't let them." "My father is a powerful man," Rosalie reminded him, "and stubborn. He doesn't forgive easily." "Neither do I," Forrest replied, his jaw set. "But I protect what's mine." January passed into February with no sign of Thomas or emissaries from Rosalie Davidson. As winter's grip began to loosen, Rosalie gradually relaxed, allowing herself to fully embrace her new life as Forrest's wife and Hope's mother. Then, on a mild day in early March, a carriage appeared on the road to the ranch, an elegant conveyance pulled by matched bay horses, clearly from town, but not belonging to any local resident. Rosalie was in the garden, planning the spring planting with Hope bundled against the lingering chill and sleeping in a basket nearby, when she spotted the approaching carriage. Her heart raced, and she quickly gathered Hope into her arms, backing toward the house. Forrest emerged from the barn, alerted by the sound of approaching wheels. He moved to stand protectively in front of Rosalie and the baby as the carriage came to a halt in the yard. The door opened, and a figure descended, a woman, not a man, wrapped in an expensive traveling cloak. As she turned toward them, pushing back her hood, Rosalie gasped. "Mother?" Eleanor Davidson stood before them, her face lined with fatigue from the journey, but her eyes bright as they took in the sight of her daughter and the infant in her arms. "Rosalie," she breathed, "thank God I've found you." Forrest's hand tightened on Rosalie's shoulder. "Mrs. Davidson," he said, his voice cautious but not unwelcoming. "This is unexpected." Eleanor's gaze shifted to him, assessing. "You must be Mr. Norwood, the man who married my daughter." "I am," Forrest confirmed, "and you're welcome at our home, provided your intentions are peaceful." A hint of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. "Quite peaceful, I assure you. May we go inside? It's been a long journey from Missouri." In the warm kitchen, Eleanor removed her cloak and accepted a cup of tea from Rosalie, who moved about with Hope still cradled in one arm, unwilling to let her daughter out of her sight with this unexpected visitor present. "She's beautiful," Eleanor said softly, her eyes fixed on the baby. "May I hold her?" Rosalie hesitated, looking to Forrest, who gave a slight nod. Carefully, she placed Hope in her mother's arms. Eleanor's face transformed as she gazed down at her granddaughter, tears gathering in her eyes. "She has your nose," she whispered, "and your father's chin." "Why are you here, Mother?" Rosalie asked, unable to bear the suspense any longer. "Has Father sent you to bring me back?" Eleanor looked up, her expression serious. "Your father doesn't know I'm here. As far as he's concerned, I'm visiting my sister in Chicago." She took a deep breath. "When Thomas Whitley and those men returned without you, your father was furious. He wanted to send more men, perhaps even go himself. I managed to dissuade him, at least temporarily." "How?" Forrest asked, his arm protectively around Rosalie's waist. "I reminded him of the scandal that would ensue if word got out that Rosalie Davidson's daughter had been forcibly taken from her husband's home," Eleanor explained. "The same business associates he was so concerned about impressing would be appalled." "So he's given up?" Rosalie asked, hardly daring to hope. Eleanor shook her head. "Not entirely, but he's reconsidering his approach. I used the opportunity to make my own inquiries. A significant sum to the right Pinkerton agent gave me your location without your father's knowledge." She reached out, taking Rosalie's hand. "I had to see for myself that you were well, that you were happy." "I am," Rosalie said simply. "Happier than I've ever been." Eleanor's gaze moved between Rosalie and Forrest, noting their closeness, the way they instinctively turned toward each other. "I can see that. It eases my heart." She looked down at Hope again. "I've been a coward, Rosalie. I should have stood up to your father when he cast you out. I should have gone with you, or at least helped you more than I did. You slipped extra money into my valise," Rosalie remembered suddenly. "I found it on the stagecoach more than I had packed. That was you, wasn't it?" Eleanor nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It was so little compared to what I should have done." "You're here now," Forrest said, his voice gentler than before. "That counts for something." Hope began to stir, making small noises of hunger. Eleanor handed her back to Rosalie, who settled into a chair to nurse her, no longer self-conscious in front of her mother. "What happens now?" Rosalie asked, as Hope suckled contentedly. "Will you tell Father where I am?" "No," Eleanor said firmly. "I'll tell him I've seen you, that you're well established with a respectable husband and living comfortably. I'll suggest that pursuing the matter further can only bring embarrassment to the Davidson name." She hesitated. "I hope, in time, he might soften. Perhaps even meet his granddaughter someday." "And if he doesn't?" Forrest asked, the protective note returning to his voice. "Then he will be the poorer for it," Eleanor replied simply. "And I will continue to visit my daughter and her family, with or without his approval." A weight lifted from Rosalie's shoulders at these words. Her mother had chosen her, had defied Josiah Davidson to seek her out, to ensure her welfare. It was more than she had dared to hope for. Eleanor stayed for a week, getting to know her granddaughter and witnessing firsthand the life Rosalie and Forrest had built together. She marveled at the ranch, at Rosalie's competence in running the household, at Forrest's evident devotion to his wife and daughter. "He's a good man," she told Rosalie as they walked together one afternoon, Hope sleeping against Rosalie's shoulder. "Better than most I've known." "He saved me," Rosalie said softly. "In every way a person can be saved." "You saved yourself, Rosalie," Eleanor corrected gently. "You had the courage to leave, to make your own way. Forrest was wise enough to recognize your worth, but you were always worthy, my darling girl." When the time came for Eleanor to depart, promises were made to write regularly, to visit when possible. As the carriage pulled away, Rosalie stood in the circle of Forrest's arm, hope secure between them, and felt a sense of completion she had never expected to find. "Are you all right?" Forrest asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "More than all right," Rosalie assured him. "I have everything I need right here." Spring bloomed across the Double N Ranch, bringing new calves to the herd and fresh growth to the garden Rosalie had planted. Hope thrived, growing into a happy, curious baby who delighted in the world around her. Letters arrived regularly from Eleanor, bringing news from Missouri, but, more importantly, reaffirming the bond between mother and daughter that had been rekindled. In June, as wildflowers carpeted the meadows and the days stretched long and golden, Rosalie and Forrest celebrated their first wedding anniversary with a picnic by the creek where they had first viewed the ranch together. "Do you ever regret it?" Rosalie asked, as they lay on a blanket, watching Hope attempt to crawl after a butterfly. "Taking in a desperate pregnant woman, making her your wife, raising another man's child as your own?" Forrest propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with those clear blue eyes that still made her heart race. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "You and Hope are the best things that ever happened to me, Rosalie Norwood. This past year has been the happiest of my life." "Mine too," she whispered, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "Though I was thinking," Forrest continued, a mischievous glint in his eye, "that Hope might like a brother or sister someday, someone to play with, to share this land with when they're grown." Warmth spread through Rosalie at the thought. "I'd like that too," she admitted. "Very much." Forrest's smile was slow and full of promise as he lowered his mouth to hers. "Then I suppose we should start practicing." As they kissed, with their daughter gurgling happily nearby and the Colorado sun bathing them in warmth, Rosalie marveled at the journey that had brought her here. Cast out by her family, she had found a new one, a family built on love, respect, and choice rather than obligation and appearances. In the years that followed, the Double N Ranch prospered, as did the Norwood family. Hope was joined by a brother, Samuel, and later by twin sisters, Emma and Elizabeth. Eleanor Davidson became a regular visitor, eventually moving to Clear Creek permanently after Josiah's death, building a small house near the ranch where she could be close to her grandchildren. Thomas Whitley never returned, nor did any emissaries from Josiah Davidson. Whether due to Eleanor's influence or simply acceptance of a situation he could not change, Rosalie's father had finally let her go. On warm summer evenings when the work of the day was done and the children were finally asleep, Rosalie and Forrest would often sit on the porch of their expanded home, watching the stars emerge over the land they both loved. "Did you ever imagine this life?" Forrest would sometimes ask, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him. And Rosalie would smile, thinking of that desperate young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Clear Creek all those years ago, carrying nothing but a valise and an unborn child, having no idea that salvation awaited in the form of a blue-eyed rancher with a heart big enough to love them both. "No," she would answer truthfully. "It's better than anything I could have imagined." And in those moments, surrounded by the night sounds of the ranch, secure in the love of the man who had chosen her, Rosalie knew that sometimes the hardest journeys led to the most beautiful destinations. Cast out by one family, she had found another one founded on love and acceptance, one that had grown and flourished in the fertile soil of the Colorado wilderness. It was a life worth every hardship, every tear, every moment of fear and uncertainty. A life built not on the expectations of others, but on the choices they had made together. A true home, in every sense of the word. And as Forrest's lips found hers in the gathering darkness, Rosalie knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be in the arms of the man who had taken her in when she had nowhere else to go, who had given her his name, his heart, and a love strong enough to last a lifetime.